Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 8 of the Natural Female Muscle Podcast. Today, we have a slightly different episode. So, we're going to be doing a solo episode today, which I'm very excited for. Obviously, it's not something that I've done in the past. So far on the podcast, I've only had guests on. Previously, when I've done podcasts, I've only ever been on, with other people as a guest myself. So, to be doing a solo episode today is very exciting and something that I'm doing because I've had a lot of requests from people to talk a little bit more about my journey and what bodybuilding has been like for me. And this is something that I suppose I struggle with in a sense because I don't really like talking about myself very much unless somebody asks me. I think that I want to share my story in a way that's going to help others. And I don't want to just kind of talk about things that don't necessarily provide value because, anyone who follows me and sees the stuff that I put out, whether it be YouTube, Instagram, my number one priority with everything is always trying to give something positive. I suppose maybe some of that comes through the fact that when I first got into the fitness industry, when I first got into bodybuilding, maybe I felt like I followed a lot of people who were maybe showing how great they looked or, what they were achieving. And I maybe didn't really feel like I was getting much out of it or whether I wasn't really like learning from what they'd done or how they got there. So I always want to make sure that when I'm putting something out, I'm actually putting something out that I'm like, okay, there's a message in this that's going to help someone. It doesn't mean they have to be in the same situation that I've been or have experienced the same things that I have, but there's something to still take away from that. So hopefully that's something that I'll be able to share in this episode today. But firstly, before I start, I want to say, huge thank you to anyone who has been listening to these episodes, is enjoying these episodes. Truly means so much. It doesn't matter how many people listen to these. It's even just one person can listen and take something positive away from it. It's just, it continues to blow my mind. Like I have people who have messaged me on Instagram and just said, thank you so much for this episode, relating to, this individual or their experience. It makes me feel less alone in the community, or it's helped me to, learn more about this or feel more a part of it. And I think that that's absolutely incredible. And I'll never, ever, ever be one of those people who like gets a message from somebody who says something about something that I've done or something that I've shared and just kind of brush it off. Like it will always, really mean a lot to me because I didn't ever, ever, ever think that I'd be in the position that I'm in now when it comes to, my career, my bodybuilding, my well-being, a lot of these things. And it's why I'm so passionate about what I do, with coaching and with this podcast and with everything that I put out there. There's a much deeper meaning to it. And, I'm going to obviously share that within my journey for you guys today. I think the first thing for me to just touch upon before I kind of really delve into what I'm going to discuss in this episode is I do want to give a little bit of a trigger warning because I will touch upon just eating disorders and mental health issues very, very briefly. And I just want to make sure that anyone who's listening to this is aware to that before I delve into it. So I think when I go through my journey, there's kind of like 3 stages. I was trying to break this down. I would say my first stage with bodybuilding and fitness was like the discovery and mistakes phase, which I think everyone kind of needs to go through a little bit. My second phase is like my mid phase, which was my first experience of like having a coach and prepping. And that I've kind of labeled as like my test and challenge phase. And then the third phase, which is where I'm at now, and that's been from finishing that prep to where I'm at now in 2023. I'd say that's like my development and maturation phase, like where I've really, really matured and developed and kind of found where I'm at now with bodybuilding and who I am. But it definitely didn't start out like that. It really didn't. And I think that so many people feel as though, they get into bodybuilding, they get into training and they just need to know everything and everything needs to be perfect. And the likelihood is that's probably not going to be the case. Especially if you're younger, you've got a lot of things to figure out. You've got a lot of changes probably going on, whether it be moving, whether it be jobs, whether it be finding a place in your career. And that's maybe not even happening on the younger age. That can go on for a long period of time. And I think that we all need a little bit of an adjustment period to kind of figure out where we're at and what we want and what kind of works for us in that sense. So I'll kind of go through all the different phases, and hopefully you guys can take some different things out of them, and also just mainly see that this position that I'm in now, that maybe I share on socials, I share on my YouTube and on my log, and talk through all these things in where I'm at this point in my, career, both bodybuilding and life. It's not always been the case. It's taken me a good amount of time to get there. So I'll roll you guys back to the very start. And I started training and bodybuilding really from the get-go in 2017. So to put into context, 2017, this was the year that I'd actually just finished my GCSEs. So I was 16 when I started training. This was a really interesting introduction to training for me. Before I actually started going to the gym in 2017, I struggled for several years. I think from about the age of, I'd say, 11, I had a really big difficulty with, eating disorders, self-worth, mental health issues. Kind of went on for a while. I think the root causes of that are maybe not necessarily something that I need to go into, but, something I really struggled with, especially, I went to an all-girls school, and there are a lot of things kind of going on there that I'm sure definitely didn't have a further positive contribution. And I had a lot of self-comparison in my life and a lot of self-doubt for, so many reasons. And it really harmed who I was, and what I thought my future was going to look like, to the extent where I really didn't see much of a future for myself. And I've covered a lot of this in the podcast that myself and Hannah used to do. I think maybe in a little bit more detail, but all in all, I really struggled. I really struggled from a young age. I think as soon as I kind of came into figuring out who I was as like a woman, like when you get to that age, sort of like puberty age, you start to think about who you are and how you feel about yourself as your body changes, as it develops, as your mind changes. And I was very lost, I was really quite lost amongst, several different things that were kind of going on. And so looking towards things ahead, there really weren't many thoughts at all. And I think I took to maybe food for a lot of control in that sense. And as a result, I really struggled with that for several years. I did get to a point, I'm going to say 2015, where I started to recover from, my restrictive and disordered eating patterns that I was experiencing at that point. But, my mental health issues really didn't improve. And similarly, I probably went in the opposite direction. So I went from having immense control over everything I did on the day-to-day to then having or feeling as though I had very little control. So I look back at it and it's quite interesting. And I've spoken to quite a few girls who've kind of been through a similar thing. But now that I kind of have all the knowledge that I have as a coach, and this is a huge reason why learning and information and all these things is so important to me, is because I know how life-changing it is. I know how life-changing it is to understand our bodies, understand how things work, understand what's good for us and what can help us feel better. Because some of the guidance that I got back then was just not great. Like I went to see a number of individuals at that point in my life at a young age to try and like help me. And I really had very little guidance in terms of, understanding how to look after my body in a healthy manner after that period. And it kind of just left me feeling like people were basically telling me I could have one extreme or nothing. Like you can either have some control and awareness or like none. I was like, this is really confusing. So it kind of left me in a space after that. I think from the ages of like 15 to 15, 16, 14 to 16 roughly, I kind of had like really like no guidance. And I actually went from being quite underweight to not necessarily overweight, but I really was not comfortable in my skin at all, like at all. And as much as I'd say I maybe wasn't of a healthy weight, it was more because I felt as though I wasn't doing anything to be better. I wasn't doing anything to take control of my circumstance in a healthy way. And I wanted to. Like at this point, I had now taken time to, psychologically kind of like recovered from my disordered eating, which I think is actually very important. And this is why I want to definitely iterate this thought. I think that a lot of people like to think that individuals will go from disordered eating habits straight into bodybuilding. In some situations they do. But I think it's really, really, really important that you take time to just come away from that before you consider, going into training or starting to take control of your nutrition. So in a way, it really, really benefited me that I had a good few years where I actually kind of came back to normality. I came back to a healthy position, which is obviously very important, like regaining like good physiological health, getting a menstrual cycle, making sure that my mental health was in a better spot. I wouldn't say it was in a great spot, but it was in a better spot. And I was ready to start just doing something to basically give me purpose again, give me some form of purpose in a positive sense, to help me feel as though I was actually just improving my health and my fitness and my well-being, because I always played sport growing up. I played hockey, I was involved in athletics, I was always very, very aware of like my fitness and my athletic capabilities. That was always something that I loved, and obviously when I was restricting food, that was not beneficial. But then when I came out the other end, I started to notice that like I'm not actually doing anything to have any awareness of my nutrition anymore. I'm no longer doing anything to, remain active. I feel like I'm really, really limiting out on my potential and feeling some form of purpose and progression, which was something that I had always, always wanted. So at this point, I was just like, I really want to do something to, improve this. And I think up until, this point, I just felt like all of these things that I often used to see, whether it be athletes, whether it be bodybuilders, whatever it was, it always felt like that was something that was meant for other people, but not for me. Like I had cousins who were top athletes, family members even would, they were very realistic in a harsh way to an extent with some of these things. And it was kind of like, that's the kind of thing that other people do. It's not kind of something that's probably going to be realistic for you to, do anything that's kind of out of the ordinary, when it comes to, physical attainment, when it comes to business, when it comes to all of these things. And my family, by the way, massively obsessed with their weight and food and things like that, which probably plays somewhat of a role. But the idea of just being able to basically take control of things in a positive way was not something that I really, really seemed as like possible, But I got to a point where I was like, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. I want to do something and I can do something. And I'm actually very, very grateful. The individual that I was actually with at the time, who was like my partner, he was training as like most kind of 16, 17-year-old boys do. And I was like, I want to do this. Like, I need to do something that's going to get me moving again, that's going to give me purpose, because I was reaching that point where I was like, right, my life is ahead of me now. And I don't like the way that things are kind of looking for me at the moment. Whether that be work, whether that be life, whether how I was feeling in myself. I was like, I could so easily just let things carry on the way they are, going to parties, drinking on a weekend, falling into a job that I don't like, continuing to feel very lost. All these things looked like that was what was laying ahead of me in, a couple of years' time. I was like, I'm not okay with this. So thankfully, he kind of took me to the gym, it was really helpful, because I was very, 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 very insecure, like extremely insecure. So having somebody that I felt confident enough to kind of go with, and like with their friends and being introduced to this, it was nice. And to be honest, my first introduction to the gym, like I kind of always trained somewhat like a bodybuilder. I definitely had influences of like, doing the glute kickbacks, and don't get me wrong, like my first session I literally hid around a corner and took a step and I think a kettlebell, and I just did like workout there because I was so scared of going in like the weight area. But once I had the comfortability of going into that area with my boyfriend at the time and his friends, I just wanted to train like them. And I always had a desire to do what the boys were doing. Like I was a massive, massive, massive tomboy growing up. I never wanted to wear dresses, never wanted to wear skirts, never wanted to wear colours. I just wanted to wear my football kits and I wanted to play with the boys. Like all my family were boys. And I was always told like, no, that's not what girls do. Like that's for the boys to play. Like, Laurie, you shouldn't wear this. You should be wearing, a dress that'll be looking pretty. And I never, ever, ever, ever liked it. So, when I actually felt confident enough to, be in that area, I was like, okay, cool, I want to do what they're doing. And I tried to keep up. I wanted to join them on dumbbell chest press, on the deadlift. I wanted to just do whatever they were doing. And that was really, really fun for me. And that was a start point where, like, as soon as I started, that was it. Like, I made a decision after I finished my GCSEs, and I was like, I'm doing this now. And ever since then, like, my life has been bodybuilding. It was like I've trained like 4 or 5 times a week, every week. I've had a training split ever since then, albeit my nutrition wasn't really like monitored because I didn't know at that time. I just kind of ate whatever, which was good because it enabled me to grow a bit. But it was just like, cool, I love this. Like, I love training. I love being here. This is it. And it really just escalated from there. So like my first couple of years of training, I was still at school. I was finishing my A levels. The initial year, I probably played things quite well. I never followed a training plan or anything. I think I just kind of copied what my boyfriend was doing. We were probably doing arms, back, chest, legs. And I did the standard sort of, 4 sets of 10 on pretty much everything for my first 3 years of training, really. But it was good fun, and I definitely learned a lot. And I just enjoyed going to the gym. Yes, I maybe wanted to improve my physique, but it really wasn't. It was never, ever, ever the main goal with my training. I just liked being there. I think the main issue that I started to encounter was when I started to try and gain an awareness of my nutrition. So really, like, the first year, I just ate whatever. I just made sure I was getting some protein in across the day. I always had set meals that I would take with me to school. So, like I said, once I started bodybuilding, I was bodybuilding. So I had meals that I would prepare. I would take them to school with me from literally the age of 16, 17, every single day. And then once I got into like my final year of school, I probably just started restricting my food a little bit too much. I think I started to become aware of like, okay, I probably need to monitor my nutrition. And I felt as though, because I just simply didn't have like the knowledge at that point, it was definitely in no way related to previous eating habits or anything like that. It was purely just me trying to understand how to be in a deficit or be in a surplus. And this is where I wish I had a coach initially. And something that's so funny is when I was at this point, I definitely could have had a coach, and I wanted to get a coach, and I wanted to be a bodybuilder, but I felt like I had to earn something in order to do that. So that's why I didn't reach out to anyone. Like, I didn't get a coach. I didn't reach out for any advice because, like, I was like, I'm just a kid at school trying to bodybuild. Like, I look like I don't train. Like, do I have the right to kind of reach out to a coach? And I felt like if I would, coaches would just say like, sorry, like, I'm not going to help you. But I really, really wish that I had. Like, you don't need to be at any point in your journey to have a coach, but the sooner that you recognize that having a coach will benefit you, like, the more time that you will have available to progress, the less time that you will spend wasted. And this is where then, like, I was looking, okay, cool, I want a mini diet to go on holiday, or I want to push food a little bit more. And I never pushed things enough, like, I don't think I ever went above 52 kilos, which, to put into context now, I'm about 66 kilos. So I really, really didn't have any idea. And that was just down to like naivety and not really knowing enough really at that point. So I kind of spent a lot of that time at maintenance and then really just being a bit too lean because I was like, okay, cool, I need to deficit. And I probably saw a lot of people on Instagram who were lean all the time because obviously they're competing. And I felt like, oh, okay, so I probably need to be a bit leaner. And I was really like lean for a good period of time there. I was like probably 46, 47 kilos just dieting on like 1,000 calories for 6 months plus. And it wasn't, again, like I say, out of a place of over restricting. It was just because I thought that was what I kind of needed to do. And for my goals, I was like, okay, cool, we get lean and then we grow. And I really, really should have reached out or learned more at this point. Bear in mind, at this time I'm still at school, I'm still doing my A levels, so I didn't really have the ability to kind of learn more at this point, just based on where I was in life. And I just spent a lot of time kind of being a little bit too restricted. And that wasn't, negative. I've never, ever, ever had, much of a problem when it comes to dieting due to previous effects. And that's not due to me psychologically over restricting. It's literally just like I say, because I know what it's like to to not eat. So when it comes to, eating and having like 5 or 6 meals a day, I kind of don't struggle with it too much. But I got to the end of that year, I'd finished school, and because I'd kind of left school at that point, I was like, you know what? This is now the next chapter in my life, and I really, really want to do all these things that I've said I'm going to do. So I'm going to get a coach, and I'm going to really, really go all in on bodybuilding. Now, at this point as well, I was going to university. That was kind of the set path for me. Not by choice, really. It was just one of those things that I'm sure a lot of people will maybe be able to relate to, where your families kind of have all gone down that university path, or they've put you in education where they want you to go down that path. I went to a private all-girls school. It's not something I'm going to hide. And it was just expected. It was expected that I went to a university. It was expected that I had an academic degree. At school, not a single individual ever asked me, what do I want to do? What do I want to do with my career? What do I want to do with my life? It was always, where are you going to uni? What are you going to study? Because my school also wanted to have the statistics that X amount of people went to uni. And just nobody really asked me that question. I think when I maybe spoke to my friends, I said, I'd love to PT. I'd love to learn more about fitness, because this is something that's truly changed my life, because it did. It gave me a purpose. I found passion in training. I found passion in something that I thought I never, ever could. It was like just incredible, like absolutely incredible change for me. But I just didn't have anyone asking me what I wanted to do. And even when I think about when I picked my degree, so I went to study business, it was just because like my family had been in business, and teachers kind of just recommended me to do that. I honestly don't even remember deciding to do it, which is kind of insane. I wish that I had gone and done something else. I even remember that summer I got my results, and I sat down with my dad and I said, I want to go and I want to actually do sports science. I want to do a foundation in sports science and do a degree there because it's what I'm passionate about. And he basically told me that, I love my dad, by the way. He basically told me that I was like gonna, like waste my life away. No one was going to employ me if I, decided not to go to like university or get a proper degree, or even if I decided to just be a PT. And I just constantly felt like I was doing stuff for other people rather than for myself, and just not following the things that I wanted to do. Now I look back, I don't regret any of the kind of decisions that I've made, because everything has led me exactly to where I'm at today. But I just wish I'd had more thought about it. But the decision I ended up making was to go to uni. I chose specifically, I was like, if I'm going to go to uni, I'm going to go somewhere that I know is going to help me from a bodybuilding standpoint. So I specifically picked to go to uni in Sheffield, because I wanted to train at Ultraflex Rotherham. Like that was already my set goal from being like literally 17. I decided that was what was going to happen. So this is literally back in 2017 now. So that was what I kind of set myself. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to train at Ultraflex Rotherham. I've been there a few times because at home I didn't live too far away from there, so I'd often go on the weekends. I was like, I'm going to reach out to Cuba, because I knew him from the gym. I followed him on social media. I'd always followed Meg, who many of you will know. Meg is like my best friend now, but prior to this, I'd followed her on socials. I'd been to a few of her posing camps, so I had spoken to her before, and she'd suggested to me that I reach out to Cuba as well. So I reached out to him at that point, and I was like, look, I want to be a bodybuilder, I want to be a competitive athlete. I said, I think I'm going to do bikini, because at this point I just was like, okay, this is where I'm at in muscularity. Surely I just kind of need to do bikini. I saw it as like the entry level, which I kind of understand that it is, especially within, NPC IFBB, which was all I knew at the time. I didn't know anything else. It's a different ball game to go up to do, figure if you're a natural athlete. So I was like, okay, I need to do bikini. Ultimately, figure was what I always wanted to do. I think the first ever video I ever watched of any sort of bodybuilding content was Nicole Wilkins, and I watched this video of her at like prepping for the Olympia, and I was like, holy shit, that is so cool. That's what I want to do. But I started out and I was like, look, I'm probably going to be in bikini, so let's go for this. I'm happy to prep, whenever you deem that I'm ready. So this is now as I come into the test and challenge phase. So I've kind of gone through the discovery and mistakes phase, which was, my first initial years, bodybuilding, kind of messing around with different things, but mainly just enjoying training, to be honest. And then from there, taking things a bit more seriously, reaching out to a coach and being like, I want to go all in on this and I want to do everything that I can do. So at this point, I started uni. I started training at Ultraflex Rotherham full time. That was my kind of like local gym. Yes, it was a bit of a journey to get there, but it was worth it for me. I traveled like 50 minutes every day to get there because I wanted to train there. I wanted to be in that environment around those people, and that made the biggest difference to my bodybuilding journey ever, because I even started training with Meg at that time for a few sessions. I was in the gym around people like Kuba, AJ, Jimmy, like all these people who were doing these insane sessions. I remember I used to see the sessions that, like Cooper and AJ do, and I just like, that is so cool. Like, that's what I want to do one day. And it made a massive difference just being in that environment. I'll admit at this point, I wasn't super happy in terms of where I was going with uni, because I wasn't loving it. I think I wanted to drop out from the first couple of days, and I was going to drop out and do PT and do a PT course and all coaching course and just pursue that. Because I started to obviously learn a lot more. It was all I was interested in. I was doing learning outside of my uni. It was all I really wanted to do. But I knew that, or I felt like at the time, my family would be really disappointed in me, which they probably would have. But in retrospect, I probably could have gone for the things that I really wanted to do. But I think that everything kind of threw a spanner in the works with COVID and everything like that. So I had a bit of an off season. From that point, that was the first like true off season that I did, and I loved it. At this point now, my biggest concern was always I didn't know what I needed to do, and that's why I reached out to a coach, because I was like, I need to learn, I need to know what I need to do, and as soon as I put my trust in them, I will do anything that they tell me to do. It comes with its positives and negatives, because you kind of have to question and feedback. That's a really important part of coaching, but it benefited me for sure, because I just went all in. I didn't worry about the weight gain. I didn't worry about this and that. I was like, I know that I have trust in this coach, and all I need to do is give my maximum effort to what we have set in stone, and I'll get the results that I need. And I had a lot of fun that off season. I was eating a lot of food, most food I'd ever eaten. And it really solidified my like enjoyment for the bodybuilding process. And after that kind of pushing phase, Cuba was like, you know what, we're good to prep this year. You can prep this year. I was like, okay, cool. I think maybe I could have waited a bit longer to prep, but to be honest, I'd been training for 4 years by that point, and I felt as though I was ready to prep. And I think that actually prepping at that point did give me a good amount of experience, and I definitely had enough muscle mass to compete at that point in my life. So I'm really, really glad that I did actually prep that year and didn't wait any longer. And so many things fell into place as a result of prepping that year. It was an interesting year because it was the year of COVID. So it challenged me a lot in terms of prepping and dealing with COVID at the same time, and shows being moved. And I think the next time I prep, if I have an actual predictable prep where things like that aren't happening, it'll probably feel so much better in comparison. But we went into prep that year. The goal was to do Tubos qualifier and then the British finals, whenever that was going to be. But obviously the shows just kept getting moved. Reason why we were doing Tubos was just because I had no idea of natural federations. Like, I literally did not. The only natural like athlete that I knew of was AJ, because he was in the gym. I'd never spoken to him, at this point. So it wasn't really a discussion I'd had with anyone about natural shows or something to do. I think now I look back, I wish I had done that and knew more, but we all learn from different experiences. But that prep ended up being a much longer prep than anticipated, because the shows kept getting moved, and it ended up being much later on in the year, and I ended up going straight into what was like the British finals, which was definitely an interesting one. And the prep itself was a big challenge for me, I think, because my routine was not great. I was at uni, but because it was COVID, there was like no uni going on, so it really, really impacted me in a bad way, because I had so little going on that my routine was trash. Like I had no real sort of structure to my days. I was like, had a no sleep routine. My routine, even when it came to like cardio steps, things like that, was not good. So I was kind of just all over the place at that point. And that made things very, very difficult for me in the prep. And it's why I'm so adamant about, routine and things like that now, because coming out of that prep, I literally did a whole like 180 on, my bodybuilding process, in the sense that I like developed a routine, I developed a sleep time, I found ways to actually manage things consistently on a day to day. And I look back at that prep and I think, oh my God, I could have made this so much easier for myself by doing this. And I put a lot of like really silly, unnecessary pressure on myself in that prep too. I don't know why. I know I was in a bit of a funny spot at that point in my life anyway, with everything going on with uni and relationships too at that side. And I'm sure that definitely, played a little bit of a role. But I even was like just throwing hissy fits in sessions when, numbers were dropping and things like that. And I should have been way more open, even just like with my coach at this point, because I was so determined to be one of those people who was like, no, I'm good, I'm not hungry, I'm not tired, my sessions are fine, like no problems whatsoever. And I really should have been more honest, because this is why I'm so keen, like especially with my first time clients, is to ask them, like, how are you getting on? Like, how's training? How are these things? And if they're having struggles, like, tell me, because these are points where your coach can then actually help you if you're telling them. So, for example, if I was to say, like, I'm really not enjoying that my strength is dropping off and this and that, your coach can then reason with you and be like, look, this is a normal part of the process. At some point, you're going to drop off strength. And you need to understand that as long as you're keeping good quality work, make sure you're prioritizing enjoying the sessions. Let's look at some ways we can improve enjoying the sessions. Can we increase motivation for these? Can we get a good pre-workout routine? Can we make sure that we're setting up a routine on the day-to-day with expenditure to make sure it's not affecting your session performance? All of these things, and that's why it's so important to definitely be open about them. But I know that thankfully I've learned a lot, and coming out of that prep was when I started to develop further, knowledge when it came to bodybuilding. I started to coach that year as well. So I think towards the end of that year, I kind of started coaching, taking on clients, working with friends and people for free for quite a long time. I remember the first time I took on like my first client that year, and they were paying me a very, very minimal amount. It was nothing really, but it was even just like having one client who was like actually willing to pay me for my services at that point. It was just absolutely incredible, and I always look back to that. But I think the experience in itself, and then just being determined to kind of develop from there, it really, really taught me so much. And I went to that British finals and I did not place, kind of deservingly, with like where I was at that point. I was against incredible athletes who'd been training for years and years, who are far more advanced, who are far older. I was only 19, so I was the youngest person in like the whole show, and it was a British finals level show with some athletes who ultimately were assisted, even bikini within the NPC, IFBB, like those athletes, like some of them are assisted. So as a result, that again makes it harder. And being at the age I was, and the training age, I was never going to stand a real chance. And I knew that. So I went into that show and I just had fun. Like I genuinely just had fun. Of course, it was like a little bit annoying that I didn't place, but I came away from it with the pure mindset of like, okay, I need to be better. And I can't wait to go back into off season now, because I'd kind of learned a lot throughout that prep in terms of bodybuilding, in terms of my life, in terms of where I wanted things to go. And I was just determined to get back in the gym, get training again, get after it. And that was really, really like all I cared about. I was just so excited to go back into off season and get training well. And as a result, I didn't really struggle too much with the post-show period in itself. It was actually a time where I fixed a lot of things in my life and was like, right, this is what I want to do. This is what I love. And I kind of put a lot of things in order and just really attacked after it. And I was so focused on taking that loss in a positive way that it just made my bodybuilding process better and better and better. And then this was the point in my life where now I'm going to say this is like my development and maturation phase, where I met AJ, and I'd be lying if I said that wasn't just such a huge change in my life. I mean, I'd known him for maybe like a year or so up until this point, but we were just kind of friends. And then that was when we kind of started actually seeing each other, and we're together kind of after that prep period. for myself, and I think he was still actually in prep at that point, before he did the British finals that year. But being with him and, being with somebody who really, really thought the way that I did about bodybuilding and about life it was just a huge game changer. It just made the world of difference for me to, be with somebody who could like really believe in me and see my goals and see what I wanted to do. When it came to both like what I want to do work wise and bodybuilding wise, because obviously at this point I'm also very concerned with the fact that like I want to be a really good coach, and I'm so passionate about this because I'd seen how much this had changed my life, and I'd already learned so much from Cuba up until this point in my own research. And I was like, I really, really want to do this. And having AJ to effectively be like a mentor for me at that point, it just catapulted me to a new level. And we also started training together as we went into another lockdown. So as a result, we started training together at that point. Previously, he'd been training with Cuba. I'd been training with Meg. So we started training together. He drastically improved my training. Just being with him and seeing the intensity that he trains at, like so much of what I've learned from a coaching standpoint, a training standpoint, a business standpoint has been from him. And I'm not afraid to say that. And that's something that in my position as somebody who is really, really determined to be extremely hardworking and ambitious, like I was able to take a lot out of. And I know a lot of people maybe, like to think that it's put me in more of an advantageous position, like sure. But I think that a lot of other people could be in my position and not have worked, as hard as I've done in that point. It just improved my routine to get all the things that I need to do done. And this is why I was able to finish my degree, get the degree that I did and the result that I did, and also then build my coaching business and make drastic bodybuilding process from 2020 onwards. Like every single day without fault, I was up, sat at my desk at 5, 6 a.m. working, every day, no matter what the day was, doing uni work, bodybuilding work, coaching work, education, everything, completing other qualifications for coaching, and absolutely everything went into that because he enabled me to see like what was possible when you really put everything down, and having that self-belief just made a huge difference. So this was kind of where I took that next transition and the real like big step within, my own process into kind of just unlocking like my potential and really seeing what I was truly like so capable of at that point. And this is where then in my bodybuilding process, I actually decided to transition away from bikini. I came away from that show and I was like, yeah, this is not for me. It's great. And I have so much appreciation for those girls because it's a really damn hard category to like nail. And I was like, I just don't love it. I don't feel passionate about it at all. Doing the training that you need to for bikini is not something that I feel passionate about. The posing, the look, it's just not me. Like I mentioned, I'm actually a bit of a tomboy, as many of you will probably be able to guess if you watch my Instagram and things like that. I'm not super like flaunty and feminine. And I was like, look, I want to move up. I want to I want to do something else. At this point though, still actually unaware fully about natural feds when I made the decision. I wasn't quite with AJ when I made this point. And it was only until I actually went to see AJ at the British finals that year with the UK DFBA, and then we went to Italy as well for the INBA PNBA Worlds, that I started to see these federations. And we went with Lee Kemp and Rich Walker as well. Lee's obviously the founder of the UK DFBA, and I honestly was just blown away. I was so blown away because I'd not seen anything like it. And I'd obviously had my experience competing at the British finals with Two Bros that year. And I went to the Worlds and I was like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, one, these athletes look incredible. Two, the production was amazing. And three, I was like, wow, there's like a team community. Like, the federations care about the athletes and they're going as a team and they're wearing team kit. And it was just like so cool. I was like absolutely amazed by it. And this was that when there I was like, okay, well, why have I been thinking about, going down this route with, the like Two Bros NPC? That was where I was thinking of going with figure. I was like, I can do this. Like, why am I not thinking about this? And honestly, I think the reason why I hadn't was because I kind of thought the only route was like that Olympia route, or, you know, going down the route with two bros and stuff. And I thought that was like really all that was like actually good. I thought, you know, like natural feds is not really much kind of going on there, and all the athletes are like, they're not great because they're natural. Like, genuinely, I was naive, and I'm happy to admit that. And I started going, I was like, this is insane. Like, this is absolutely awesome. This is something that I want and need to be a part of. I was kind of blown away by it. And it's why I'm so passionate about this, because I almost went down that route purely out of lack of knowledge and awareness and exposure. And I want to expose more people to this, because I can't believe how amazing it is and how different my life would be if I'd chosen to go down that way, purely because I didn't think there was another option, which sounds silly. But yeah, it was just absolutely insane to go on that trip, to see that. And I was like, this is what I'm doing. Okay, I'm set. I'm good to go. This is my goal. And ever since then, that's been what I've kind of been pursuing, just growing, being in a good off season, because I knew I needed time in off season. I wanted to focus on being a good coach. That was a really big priority for me. I wanted to be the best coach possible. So I needed to take time to just focus on my knowledge. And I was kind of nervous about it, because I was like, okay, so I'm going to try and grow my coaching business without competing, because all I'd seen was people who are prepping, and the ability, it does make things easier for people to pay more attention to you, for you to get clients when they see you being lean and getting on stage and winning shows or placing in shows. And I was really worried about that. But I spoke to AJ, and he was like, you can still do this without competing, you know. And I'm actually really proud of everything that I've been able to do without doing that and putting out information on that. And I hope that when I do step on stage, you know, that stands as a great example to hopefully other natural athletes and other aspiring coaches, to know that you don't have to do something just for business, or even just from like a progress and from bodybuilding side of things. You don't have to keep stepping on stage to be relevant, or from a business side of things, if you don't want to, or if the time is not right. And the time was not right for me to do that. You know, the original plan was actually for me to get back on stage in 2023. But gradually what happened was, obviously with me being coached by Cooper at that point, me being with AJ, when you live with somebody who is like, I'm not saying this to blow smoke, but he is one of like the best natural coaches that there is, and he's overseeing my process every day. I live with him, he is training with me on a daily basis. We're catching on to things and we're communicating about things daily. So having another coach didn't really work or make much sense at that point. So I shifted away from that. Obviously, Cuba and Meg are like two of our best friends, so it was no hard feelings on that point. He actually suggested it to AJ, and AJ didn't say anything because he wanted me to make my own decision. And from that December in 2020, we started working together from there, and that's kind of how things have been. And it's been a coaching relationship that works super, super well for us. I would never want to be coached by anyone else. I don't struggle with being coached by my partner, because we're both coaches. We both understand bodybuilding in the same way. We train together. We love training together. You know, like, bodybuilding's never been something that's gotten in the way of our relationship. We love doing it, otherwise we wouldn't do it. So that's kind of really just leading me up to where I am now. And this has been the past couple of years that have just absolutely transformed me. I feel as though every month I'm always getting better as an athlete or learning more. And this past off-season phase has taught me so much. It's taught me to appreciate growing, to appreciate different phases, to learn more, because as I've improved my routine, as I've improved my relationship with, you know, myself in like my career, like believing in my career, believing in myself as a bodybuilder, all of these things, everything's kind of come together so well. You know, I've experienced diet phases where I've handled them so much better because I have a better mindset, because I've worked on these things. Like, I've worked really hard on like journaling work on a daily basis. I still do it every single day to make sure I can not just work on, you know, ticking the boxes with eating my foods, doing this and that. I'm also working on my mindset as an athlete and as an individual. You know, I've worked super, super hard over definitely, you know, my whole process, but the past 3 years to make a big leap in my transformation of coaching, as I'm in, you know, my 6th, 7th year of training now, and just trying to take things consistently towards that new level. And now the goal is looking towards, I've mentioned this in a few podcasts, like, you know, looking towards 2025 now to get back on stage. That's going to be a 5-year difference for me from the last time I competed. And for me, that's a good amount of time for me to see a substantial amount of progress, to feel really, really confident in, you know, 5 years of really, really working away at it, allowing not only for tissue growth, but also allowing for a very strong position for me to be in mentally, to be super mentally ready for the prep, to also allow, actual like maturation to my physique based on my age. As I mentioned, I was 19 in my first prep, so I need more muscle maturity to my physique in order to be like super competitive. And that's really what matters the most to me, and I'm just looking forward to kind of seeing that. And I hope that, even through just talking through things today, that's kind of helped to give you a little bit more insight on my process. And I think that hopefully when you listen to this episode, you'll be able to understand things a bit more, hopefully ask me some more questions in terms of what I can do to sort of help on that front. But I want the main message and kind of takeaway for you guys to be able to know from this is that, like, things take time. Bodybuilding takes time. It's not something that needs to be perfect from the get-go. It's something that gets better across the process, and that's the beauty of it. The beauty of it is getting a year in, 2 years in, 3 years in plus, and looking back at every single year and seeing how much you've grown, seeing how much it's developed you, not just as a bodybuilder, but how much it develops you as an individual. Because I think that everyone says, bodybuilding is so bad for you because it allows you to be self-critical. And yes, it enables you to be self-critical in a sense because you're looking at ways that you can be better. But I think that when you're mature enough and when you've learned enough to view that in a positive way, you use it to ask you good questions like, how can I be better and improve this? How is that going to make me a better coach? How is that going to make me a better athlete? And how is that going to make me happier? How is that going to improve this? And it only enables you to get better and better and better and better when you view all of these criticisms in a positive sense and not in a negative sense. If you're just looking at criticism as a way of being like self-doubt, like, I'm not good at this, or this is bad, why should I do this? It's like, no, be like, this isn't good. Like, my coaching isn't super successful right now. Okay, cool. What can I do to make that better? How do I make that better? My physique isn't where I want it to be. How do I improve that? What do I do? What do I need to do for that? And am I going to enjoy that challenge? That's a huge, huge part of it. And I've really, really loved, talking through this today. It's been interesting doing a solo one. I'm actually quite surprised that I've managed to talk for so long. Obviously a lot to go through. It's so hard with these things to actually condense them down into, just a 50-minute episode or something like that when it's literally your life. But, it's been nice to share a little bit more of this. And I'm sure that in future solo episodes, I definitely want to delve into specific topics a little bit more, going through whether it be talking about off seasons or talking about managing mini diets or things like that. I want to be able to actually give you guys genuine bits of feedback to be able to take away from it, and definitely do some Q&As because I got some great questions as well. But with this episode being super long, I don't want you guys to have to listen to me talk for even longer than you already have. But if you have made it to the end of the episode, thank you so much for listening to this one. Means the absolute world that you guys are enjoying these episodes. If you are enjoying them, again, as I mentioned, make sure to follow and rate us on Spotify. It helps so much. And if you are watching this episode on YouTube as well, make sure to like and subscribe too, because again, just helps so much. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode, guys, and I'll be back with another episode next week.